Shout out to the GMs and the wives, the godly men, and the warm, inviting, feminine, empathetic women out there. Now, in today's video, I want to talk about synchronicity, psychotherapy, and psychedelics, and what all of these three topics really have combined in common with one another. And I have not done psychedelics for at least a psychedelic trip, like a hardcore psychedelic trip. I've not done that for years. And there was a point in my life where I did psychedelics for, it was dozens and dozens of times over the course of like 2 or 3 years. And I had specifically LSD trips, lysergic acid, diethylamide, and then psilocybin mushrooms. And so for those that are familiar with those compounds, you're going to have an understanding of where I'm coming from. But for those that are not familiar with these compounds, then you're going to, this is going to be a learning video and an educational video, hopefully, as well. Now, what exactly is a synchronicity? A synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence. A synchronicity is essentially where the narrative world of your inner world and the external world of reality collides. And so there's a spiritual path being crossed. You could see something like certain sayings on vehicles or something like, or for example, if you ask for a sign and you pray for a sign, then you're going to get certain signs around. You might see certain numbers or something. And I'm not a fan of numerology, and I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a biblical route to take when you are approaching such a synchronistic topic, but synchronicity is essentially just where you have coincidences, and you can think about these coincidences psychologically as something that is unconscious in the collective or within yourself, merging and establishing itself also within the collective conscious or your conscious itself as well. So it's almost like you are aware of the unconscious motives of synchronicity, like you are aware of the thing that you're looking for, but it's only when it's presented to you that you can make the connection. So it's like below the level of consciousness, you actually know this path that you're supposed to take, but until it's presented in over the line of consciousness, you're not going to be able to understand or be able to relate to the situation. And so I've had a lot of synchronistic events in my lifetime where I'd be talking to certain people. For example, the first time that I really experienced the Holy Spirit, I was seeing certain numbers, and I had a dream specifically with certain numbers. And in my dreams, I can sometimes see certain kinds of symbols or artifacts or books or something, and I can read certain things. And then later, whether it's later that day or in a week or in a month or even in some cases like 6 months later, I kind of see something around that it reminds me of that dream, and it's almost a mirror image of the dream in some kind of symbolic sense. So you're going to have these kinds of synchronistic events. Well, why is this important? And what exactly does this have to do with psychotherapy? And what exactly does this have to do with psychedelics? Well, when you are on psychedelics, and again, for those that have done psychedelics will know this and understand, what you are doing is you are operating from a purely spiritual place. I remember when I first did psychedelics, it was a psilocybin mushroom. And when I first did the psychedelic, I thought to myself, there's no way, like I feel like I'm a kid again. Like I feel like I'm in a wonder world again. I remember feeling so childlike, but what that childlike quality really was a sense of pure spirit and innocence. It was a very calming, and it was a very benevolent force. The psychedelics were very benevolent toward me. And at least in the beginning, the reason that I haven't done them for so long is because of my bad trip that I had just over 2.5, 3 years ago now, maybe. And I haven't really done a trip since. And it's because of that trip. It was almost as if the whole trip itself was signaling to me that I got most of what I needed, and there would be likely never a need to take a trip again in some cases. And the reason that I think that it was a bad trip was also because of the people that I was around at the time and where I was in my own headspace. I was just beginning to realize that I was really moving in a different direction in my life. And so the things that I saw on my psychedelic trip, well, within like the first week or two after that, because I did it alone, I did the psychedelic trip alone, and I usually do psychedelic trips alone. Um, at least the last like dozen or so that I did alone. And I preferred it that way because sometimes when you're around people, it's like you can psychoanalyze what they're going through and you feel it really deeply inside yourself. And so the energy that you are experiencing with other people, it's like you can experience something completely and totally with someone else while they're going through it, and you can experience it as if it's your own. And so sometimes if you're a very empathetic person, I don't recommend you actually do psychedelics. And I can't say that, full disclosure here, I'm not saying that you should do these psychoactive compounds in any way, shape, or form. I'm not an advocate of that, technically speaking. But at the same time, if you were to do them and you're a very empathetic person, I would be very mindful of the people that you're around or the environment that you're in, because you will pick up on certain energies that you may not have seen before, you may not have felt before until you're actually there. And when you are in the psychedelic state of mind, time is there's no way to describe time. Like you just are suddenly there in the experience. It's as if I never ever got used to the feeling. It was always like, the quote unquote come up of the feeling. And it was never really like, I always came away from the psychedelic trips feeling more whole. Even the bad trip, I always came away from that. I came away from that experience feeling more whole, and that's something that I never felt with anything else in my life. Like, never felt that way with alcohol when I was trying to drink alcohol, and even with marijuana when I was smoking marijuana. I didn't feel that way. Like, I would feel like it was helping as a tool for marijuana to get more in touch with my emotions. I felt my emotions more deeply. But at the same time, it made me more feminine. Like, marijuana made me more feminine. Psychedelics didn't do that, at least in my case. And it is true that sometimes psychedelics can open portals to the demonic realms or to the heavenly realms. It depends on your state of mind. It depends on your intentions. And it depends on just where you're at in life. And so psychedelics can be very dangerous for that reason, but they can also be very helpful. In my case, they were extremely helpful. And this goes back to the whole relativity of consciousness. So that's something else that I learned. I remember in one of my trips that the one of the latest of the trips that I had, I was speaking to the mushroom, and I know that sounds kind of weird to say, but it does feel like when you are alone on the trip, it does feel like you're with the spirit of the mushroom. And that sounds, I understand how that can sound, but take it with a grain of salt here. So when I was there on the trip, the mushroom told me, so you think you know something about consciousness, hmm? So you think you know something about consciousness, hmm? And I remember being there with it and with the spirit of the mushroom, and I just, like, time was something, and even just solid things. It was like everything was spirit. Everything. Like, even the water cup that I had at the time, like, it was a spirit. It was like a form of water. It wasn't necessarily a substance, it was a form. And everything around us was completely a form. Well, why is this important, and what exactly does this have to do with psychotherapy now? So, when you are in that state of mind, in that fluid state where you feel as if everything around you and everything with you is a fluidity of energy. It's like this spirit of energy. And sometimes, like, even just abstract items like a pen can hold the energy that you use to, like, when you're writing with the pen, it's almost like you can feel your energy being infused into the pen. And or even like a guitar, when I played my guitar, I could feel as if my energy was being imbued into the guitar itself because of the vibrations that was going on, and just the plucking of the strings. It was just like my whole essence was with this material thing in some sense as well. And I remember being given a ring on my great grandma's side. And, well, it was my grandma's side, but it was my great grandfather's ring. And I remember feeling the ring for the first time. And for some reason, I felt like I could feel his spirit. And I was very young. And I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling, but it was like I had like a flash of his energy within the ring. And this might sound kind of strange to some of you, but some of you may also resonate, where you just were very sensitive to the things and the people around you. And it took a lot for you to actually, like, learn how to control yourself, because in some ways you were so just open that it kind of became a problem. Like, there was no real boundaries between you and the world. And that was what was most crazy about the psychedelic experience, was that you realized that your body and everything else, there's actually really no difference. Like, everything is just part of you, and you are part of it, whatever that it was. And the it being just creation. And when you are a part of the creation, and you know that you're a part of the creation, you're a part of the creator. So this is where the psychotherapy comes into play, is now that you actually get this existentialist understanding of reality, well, then you're like blasted into understanding your emotions and why you are the way that you are. And what happens in these kinds of trips is that sometimes you'll see synchronistic activities on the trip itself or within the following weeks, and you'll receive certain kinds of understandings of why you are the way that you are and who you really are based off of your experiences. And you get to look at yourself with a raw intensity. There was a friend that I did psychedelics with in my early stages, and this was his first time, and on the come up, and it's almost weird how, like, you can sense the pattern of what's going to happen, like, throughout the trip. You can kind of just tell where things are going, but you never really know where you're actually going. Like, you know the pattern and you know the theme, but you're not sure, like, what's actually going to happen. So with this friend of mine, he was just like wrapping himself up in a blanket. Like, because what happens when you're on psychedelics psychologically is your default mode network is completely deactivated, meaning that the temperature, like your body regulating temperature and the part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, that stuff isn't working as much. It's not as active. What's really active is all the other parts of your brain. And so you have parts of your brain that are normally not connecting and communicating with each other. Now they're communicating with each other. And so you have a whole different set of understanding as far as the neuroscience goes, what's going on in your body and what's going on in your mind and body and soul. And so you're making connections that you might have not made before because now you actually have the opportunity and the perception to see certain things about yourself or your reality that you might not have seen if you never had taken them. And I know that's a fact because I experienced that myself. But for this guy, this example that I'm going to give here, he was wrapped in a blanket, and he kept saying that he loved being in the burrito. Like, he was just like, my blanket is my burrito, man. I do not want to get out of here. And then after like an hour of just chilling in the blanket, and me and my other buddy with him at the time, we were chill. We were doing our thing. We were playing music, and we were just talking about life and where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do, and just the endless possibilities and potentials of reality and life itself, and all the philosophical things, right? And then about an hour in, after the come up, because on psychedelics, specifically psilocybin mushrooms, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to kind of get to that, what I call the transcendental realm stage. And that's where you just kind of find yourself in the psychedelic realm. And so you get to that state, and after an hour of being in that state, he started to really self-reflect, and he was like, I've got to get out of the burrito. And he like opened up the blanket, and he was like, wow, I've been shoving myself away and just locking myself up like a burrito. And he was like, I didn't want to leave my burrito because this was my safe space. Like, I always thought that I couldn't be out in the world. Like, I was scared of the world. And so he was having like a real like understanding of his psychology and why he is the way he is. And this was the psychotherapy part. And when I saw that, and like, we were helping him through it, me and my other buddy, we were helping him through it at the time. And so we were just walking him through, and yeah, like that was some deeper things and some deeper analysis. And what I learned in that experience is that, I mean, in all of the psychedelic experiences in general, but most people don't know how to psychoanalyze themselves. Most people don't know how to have self-reflection. And it's a blessing. It really is a blessing to have that kind of self-reflection and analysis, and to be able to see what's actually going on and to experience the totality of life in general. But with that being said, I think that's all. There's definitely more to talk about on this subject, but I think for the purposes of this video, we hit all the things that we needed to. I hope this message was useful and insightful. Again, like, I'm not going to advocate for this kind of stuff, especially because I think it is a birthright in some sense to have one of these experiences. However, I also, because it helped me grow closer to Jesus. And on this channel, I say I follow Jesus. And there is evidence, not very strong evidence, but there is evidence that the Adam and Eve story is, the forbidden fruit is based off of psychedelic mushrooms. And is that true? It's speculative, so I'm not sure, but that is something to think about, and that is something to ponder, and that I wish people would take a little bit more seriously in the universities. This is one of the things about universities that I don't think we're going to get a lot of understanding in as far as the topic itself for years to come, because it's such a quote unquote taboo topic. And I'm the kind of person that's not afraid to talk about anything. I don't care. Like I'm a maverick in some ways. I am very my own person, and I have a particular way of following Jesus, and it's based on Jesus's words. It's not necessarily based on the Bible or anything like that, but I do value the Bible, and I think it's like it's one of the most, if it is the most important book to ever be written. But at the same time, it's not the Bible that is God. God is Jesus and his words, and whether or not we live by them is a completely different story. So, are you listening to God? And so you think you know something about consciousness, huh? I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. It was just like the most, it wasn't necessarily smug, but it was just like, yeah, you thought, bro. Like, you thought. So, yeah, I mean, every single time I always came back out of the situation with the psychedelic trip. I always came out of it a better person, even the not so good, quote unquote, bad trip. But I can't say the same for alcohol, and I can't say the same for weed. So with that being said, peace be with you till next time.